I've got a little bit more chassis work to do, so I think I'm going to go ahead and do that and just knock that out first. I really need to finish cutting this rear section up and get it out of the way. And then the frame, I think I'm just going to go ahead and bring it around here. I'm going to move my wife's car, and then I'm going to pull the frame right here in the middle and get my welder out here, my extension cord and my cutoff wheel and all that, and I'm going to finish up some stuff on this so I can at least get the transmission crossmember brackets welded to the chassis and everything. I need to go ahead and run the fuel line on the frame rail from the front to the back, which I got to drill and tap the frame for those aluminum billet clamps. And what else? I guess that's about it. Alright, so I was going to weld my crossmember brackets on here, which I'm still going to do, but this frame actually had holes in it already, and the 3/8 by 16 nuts I used, I tapped them in with a hammer. I mean, they went in there pretty snug. They still moved just barely, but anyway, I tapped it in there until it's flush. So I'm going to go ahead, I chamfered it too. I used a countersink bit, a big wide one, and countersunk that hole that was in the frame to, you know, give it a little bit of area for weld to fill in. But I'm going to go ahead and weld them nuts in the frame and then go back and grind it smooth. And then I'll drill holes in the crossmember brackets where that nut is, and I'm still going to weld it, but I'll have one bolt in there, and it's just like for a safety thing, because, you know, just in case a weld ever fails. I doubt it does, because I'm plug welding this on and perimeter fully welding around it. I doubt it would ever come off, but with a standard transmission, you know, seems like standard transmission have a little bit more shock to it, you know, going through gears and stuff. So it just makes me feel better to at least have one bolt in there. I thought about going ahead and putting two in there, but one will be fine because it's going to be welded anyway. But it's just a good use of the existing holes in the frame, and it kind of makes me feel better. All right, so in my garage, luckily, I had one long stick of 3/16 from the parts store. You can buy these as straight sticks. This might be the longest one you can get at my local store anyway. Anyways, 3/16 with standard thread fittings, but this is how I usually set up my Tri-5s, most usually, like at least the last 5 probably that I've built. I always put the brake line on this side of the chassis, and that's to keep one extra brake line from going across the front frame cradle and then all the way back this way, because the brake stuff on a, you know, left-hand drive like American car, that I want the brake lines running down this side. So luckily I had that stick here, so I'm going to go ahead and I've got it pre-bent here, and I'm going to mock it up and drill holes in the frame and put my clamps on, tap them basically. But I dug around inside, and I've got a whole bunch of extra Tri-5 parts, and luckily I had a brake hose here, and this is a replacement. Somebody's replaced it at one time. It's not brand new, but it doesn't have any signs of cracks in it, and it's still really, really flexible. So I cleaned it up and blew it out, and I'm just gonna use it back here on the rear brake hose. So that'll save me, you know, 15 bucks, 20 bucks, however much one of those are new. So I've put it on here now. I've done this in the last video, but this brake line bracket right here, it's welded to the frame, was actually over here. Well, I always drill the spot welds out of it and flip it upside down and put it over here. And then you have to take the bracket loose from the rear axle, this thing right here. There's 2 spot welds on it, and I drilled those out, and I've got to relocate it to over here, because this is where your hose connects, is to that. So if you flip the brake line bracket, you have to flip the one on your rear axle as well. So keep that in mind. But anyway, I've clamped the brake hose on and put it in place so I could start my brake line here. So all I did was put a little kind of a bend in it here. I didn't do a tight one, I just done a soft one, but I've got it up off the frame rail just a little bit. I don't want it smashed up against anything. That's why I like these 2-piece style clamps like this. Now these are actually All-Star Performance. I don't know if Summit has them in 3/16, but I use these two-piece style clamps every time I do brake lines and fuel lines. So you know, basically for a 3/16 brake line, you get the brake line clamps that are 3/16, and these have 832 countersink Allens. So I have my tap sockets out here, and I have my 832 tap, and I'm going to drill and tap the frame to be able to screw those on. So I always like to use fine thread. If I'm going through the chassis on anything, I like to use fine thread hardware, because your frame rail at the end of the day is not really that thick. So if you did a coarse thread, it'd really probably only catch a couple of threads. But doing a fine thread, you have more surface area on the bolt. But this is just how I do it. If you don't like it, I don't really care. This is just how I do them. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up putting a union up here. And then once the body goes on and I get the master cylinder mounted, I can go through and route everything the way I want it. So when I do my front brakes, what I like to do is route the brake line behind the cradle right here. I like to route it behind the cradle. That way it's out of sight. When the hood's up, you don't see a brake line going across here. But if you buy a pre-bent brake line set, it'll actually run right across the front of the frame up here. And if you get stock replacement style brake line set, or even aftermarket for a dual reservoir, it'll have two brake lines, because one has to go over here and go to your right front brake, but the other one will have to go all the way down that way to get back to the rear. But anyway, I'm going to put a union here, and then once the body's on, master cylinder's on, I can prefab, you know, mock it all up with the body on. But this would be a little bit more difficult to do with the body on, so that's why I'm doing it now. And then I'm going to do the fuel line next. But anyway, I'll probably kick this up on top of the frame here pretty quick. I might actually do it right here where this has an indent in it, where that shift pivot thing was. That way the brake line can come up and has a little bit more room to kick over and get on top of the frame. But anyway, I'm going to make sure, I made sure that the line is long enough that this is clear of a union, you know, because you got to be able to access it if you have a leak. So don't mount your union behind something that'll make it more difficult to work on. But that's the plan, guys. I'm going to drill and tap the frame for this brake line, and then I'm going to weld on the bracket for the brake line back here. And then I need to figure out what I'm going to do about the rear end today. The main brake line is installed, so that looks pretty good. It's nice and straight looking, even with the frame. So I ended up spacing these about 14 inches apart, and there's all kinds of info on the internet if you want to read about brake line spacing and stuff, but I think it's just fine. I'm using a steel line, so it's nice and firm. So this brake line setup is pretty much done. I did put a union on there, at least I had one. It was kind of nice. I had one on my box. So I put a union on, and I went ahead and tightened it, and I put a rubber cap on the end that's real tight. That way it'll keep moisture out of it. And then this one, I'm waiting on this to cool. I just welded it. So I relocated the tab from over here to there. So it is the exact measurement from the backing plate to that as it was over here. I know it might look funny because the third member is kind of offset to this side a little bit on the axle tube, so this is why this tube's a little bit shorter than that one. So this brass junction block goes in like this, and then a little clip goes in there to clip it in place, and the brake line screws into that. So that is my brake line. My flex hose for when the rear end's moving up and down, the hose does it with it. So don't ever hook a hard line directly from the frame to the rear axle. That is not a smart idea. On like a leaf spring or something, you know what I mean, leaf spring setup. Anyway, pretty happy with that. That'll work. I think it's kind of cool. I had that brake hose here, and I actually had that brake line here, but that worked out pretty good. It saved me a little money. But at least this main part is done, and I don't have to mess with it. So I think now what I'm going to work on is the fuel line, and I have it out over here. This is the fuel line that I always run on my cars, and I've run this stuff since the 90s probably. This is a universal 25-foot roll of aluminum fuel line, just aluminum tubing, whatever you want to call it. But I got this one from Summit, and it's somewhere around 20 bucks. I don't really remember exactly how much, but it's around $20 for 25 foot of it. And I've run this a bunch, and I've never had any problems with it corroding on the inside from running 10% ethanol fuel in my unleaded. Somebody had said that. That's a load of crap. So I have brake line clamps here. These are actually the Summit ones, and I buy these because they're cheaper, a little bit cheaper, and I don't know who they're made by. They're probably made by All-Star or somebody, maybe Built Specialties, I don't know. There's quite a few different companies that make these two-piece line clamps like this. But the problem that I ran into on Steve's car with these is the screws that were in there must have been metric, because they didn't fit the 1032 nuts that I tried to put on there. So anyway, I ended up having to go to the hardware store and get some 1032 screws. So anyway, I need to pull these out of here and see, because I don't even know what these are either. I'm going to pull these out and see if they'll fit in a 1032 nut, but if they're metric, I'll have to change them out to standard, because I don't have any metric taps here. And it's not just about going and buying a tap. I have to buy the tap with the drill bit, and it's usually a little bit more than a $3 or $4 pack of 1032 screws, so countersink screws. So hopefully I don't have to go back to the hardware store to get screws to do this today, hopefully. So anyway, I'm going to unroll this fuel line, which I usually pull it out of the plastic, and I'll stick it upright, and I'll put my foot right here, and then I'll just start rolling it and let the ground kind of straighten it out a little bit. It doesn't make it perfect, but it makes it look pretty good. But I will run it on this side of the chassis, and then I'll just leave it kind of long and coil it up over here, because I'll have to figure out what I'm going to do with the gas tank situation later. But it will run down the frame rail all the way up to here, and I'll leave it a little bit long up here as usual. But anyway, I'll put the majority of the clamps on the frame. That way I don't have to get under there and drill and tap anything while the body's on the frame. Now the body's going to come back off the frame at a later date, but for now I just wanted to get it to where it'll start run and move. And I'm not even going to hook up the rear brakes yet. I'm just going to do the fronts. I'm just going to put a plug in the original fuel or brake line stuff. Alright, I got the fuel line mostly done, at least from the frame cradle, all the way to the back of the top of the curve up here. So I think what I'm going to go ahead and do is cap the fuel line with some little rubber caps, both ends, and that way it'll be sealed from any bugs or any dirt or whatever, moisture. So the brake lines on this side are pretty much done. I do have that end capped. That fitting's tight to the hose. This end's tight to the junction block. And what I did is I had some scrap little short pieces of 3/16 line that was flared on one end. So I just ended up cutting them down really short and screwed them on there and tightened it, and then went ahead and put a little rubber cap on there and then a little zip tie to hold it. Because I don't have any brake lines here to build all this, and I don't really need it right now anyway. But that, man, it takes a lot longer to do stuff than, I always think, yeah, I can do that in an hour, and it ends up being 3 or 4 hours. Alright guys, it is Saturday evening. It's about probably close to 5 p.m. So I just got the two-door post body tires aired up and got it rolled back around here in the middle of the driveway. It is supposed to rain here in about an hour, and I think it's supposed to rain tomorrow as well. But I'm going to go ahead and see how far I can get. What I'd like to go ahead and do is at least get all the body mount bolts out of the car, and I need to cut the shocks off the rear. I'm just going to cut them up here. So that's the plan. I'm going to try to get the body bolts and stuff out of the frame. So I would like to get this up in the air on blocks, and I'd like to cut out the rear back here and go ahead and replace this rear piece back here. But you know, with it going to be raining and that type of stuff, I might be in trouble, so I might actually try to resituate this a little bit further over so my wife can at least get her car in here, which she might be able to actually, but I think I might take it over just a little bit further, because just in case I get it up in the air and then it starts raining and doing all kinds of silly stuff for a couple of days, I won't be able to, you know, it's going to be stuck in the air basically. But so I've got the rust cleaned off the threads the best I could on the number 1 and the number 2 body mounts here, because these are nuts and bolts up here. So I cleaned those off the best I could with a wire cut brush on the drill, and then I put PB Blaster on them. This is actually the second day in a row I've put PB Blaster on them, make sure it's good and soaked in. But anyway, I have to try to take those out. Hopefully a lot of these break, because I'm going to use an impact gun. The majority of them in the floor, some of them in the floor, they go up into body braces, so there's no nut. The nut is actually welded into the brace, and it may break off. So this could be trouble. There's 2 nuts welded in the body back here for body mounts, and I've cleaned those threads and I got those soaked in PB Blaster. I've actually had one of them nuts spin on me, like break loose and just spin, and I've clamped vice grips on it and got it out that way with an impact on the bottom. So then the 2 very rear ones right here, these are always the most difficult to try to remove of original ones, because they're always really crusty, and I'm hoping that I can get those out of there. And I did the same thing. I cleaned the threads a little bit with a wire brush and PB blasted them. So that's what I'm fixing to cut loose doing. I've got the frame is ready. I mean, for the most part. Now, if you guys haven't caught on, or you might have fast forwarded through some of the videos and missed this part, the plan is to get this body on this 4-door frame that I've already prepped out here, and I want to get it to where I'm going to stick an engine and trans and a drive shaft in it, and I'm just going to hand wire up the distributor, the starter, and the alternator, and that way the car will start and run, and I can move it around in the yard. I'm just going to do the front brakes on the car up here. I'm not going to do the rears. I'm just doing the fronts, and I'm going to do that with a bunch of stock brake parts that I have here, some new and some used, and it's just stuff that I had here. But that way it'll stop and I can drive it around in my yard, like from the front yard to the backyard. I'd like to actually store this in my backyard while I'm restoring my wife's 55, you know, after Steve's car leaves. Then once her car's done, I want to come back out, tear this car back apart, and, you know, pull the engine trans and all that back out of it, and then restore it, because there's a ton of metal work to do on it and that type of stuff. But for now, for it to move around in the yard, I'm just going to put a milk crate right there and set on it. I don't care about the holes in the floor, which technically I might try to find something to stick over these, like pieces of wood or some old mud flaps or something. Try to keep animals out of it, but I could at least put a lot of pieces in here, you know what I mean, a lot of the parts. But I'll have to put a deck lid on it. I really need a deck lid. Both deck lids I have, they're pretty much junk. I mean, I can probably build one, but it'd be so nice if I had a decent one that I could just, you know, bolt on. So, I mean, I could actually use 2 doors too. These doors are pretty rough, man. I mean, you can see the rust on the bottom of this one. This one's actually rusty right here too. So, I mean, I can go through here and cut and scab all kinds of pieces back together on this. It's going to be a lot of hours, but I won't have to spend any money. I can use 4-door doors that I have and, you know, cut these pieces out of the 4-door doors and splice in. And that's most likely what I'm going to have to do, because, you know what I mean, I sure don't want to have to buy new doors. This is going to get a whole cowl change, cowl and A-pillar change from the 4-door is going to go on here, because this one's just so far rusted. So anyway, this car's going to get cut to pieces, but I don't really care. I'm basically saving one, and I'm going to try to do it with what I have mainly. I don't mind buying a few pieces here and there, you know, new sheet metal stuff, but I want to try to hand build a lot of this stuff. So guys, I did have a subscriber, actually 2 of them. One emailed me and 2 commented on the channel. So there's actually 3 different people, and they've asked me if I need any parts and pieces that they could ship out to me. So there's a couple little small things I could use that if you have it laying around, if it's something that I can send you a couple of half-rod stickers for the parts, but I need a door spear for a 210 2-door sedan. The little door spear right here, it doesn't have the cove in it like a Bel Air. I actually need both of them. I need one for this side, I don't have it at all, and this one over here is pretty crunched up. I mean, I could probably fix that, but if somebody's got a nicer one that they want to trade out for a sticker, you know what I mean? And I know a sticker is not a good trade for, you know, parts, but I'm just looking for something used, and I don't mind something having a couple small dings or maybe a scratch or something I can sand and, you know, hammer out. But I mean, this piece I can hammer and dolly it out and fix it, but if somebody's got a nicer one, I'd sure like to have it. And the other thing I need, I have one really nice fender script that says Chevrolet, you know, the cursive Chevrolet that goes on the very front of the side of the fender. I have one really nice one that a really good friend of mine gave me about 20 years ago, and I only have the one. And I mean, I hate to buy new ones. I'd like to find another used one to put on the other front fender. So if anybody has that cursive Chevrolet script that goes on the front of a front fender of a 210, I think they're the same on a 56, but I think they're back here on a 56, not Bel Air, 210, maybe 150. I don't know actually, but I could use door spears and one Chevrolet script. And then, you know, if I ever decide down the road to paint the car, I'll try to buy new scripts, but the one Chevrolet script that I have for the front fender is really nice. Like, I cleaned it up and polished it, and it only has a couple of small little pits in it. Like, it would pass, even if I painted the car, that would pass to reuse. But, and I know finding old chrome like that's going to be tough to do, but this piece that he gave me, he said he pulled it off a car from a salvage back when he was a kid, so it was probably in the 70s, and it's just been in a box, so that may have been what saved this one, I don't know. But anyway, I just need one Chevrolet fender script and 2 door spears. So I mean, there's not really a whole ton of stuff I need. I mean, there is, but you know, like little stuff. I mean, I need if I could, I wonder, you know, if somebody's got a lower patch panel that they bought for their 2-door 55 and they didn't use it, I'd be interested in, you know, shoot me an email and I'll see what I can do on that. I wouldn't mind having the panel to put in there instead of having to cut up 4-door stuff and put it in. Well, the rain started. Dang it. So, I've got a lot of the body mounts out. Some of them broke. I can't get a wrench on those. Like the heads of these are non-existent. So I'm going to have to get in there and under there and cut it with a cutoff wheel. And then the rears back here, I haven't tried them yet. These are always a little bit tricky to get out, but I'll see if I can buzz them out of there. The shocks are actually unhooked from the frame, so I'm just going to chop off the stems there to get rid of them. But I guess not too bad. This car has some emergency brake parts on it, so I'm glad of that, all this stuff right there, because this car is going to be a 5-speed, you know, standard transmission car, so I'm going to need that working, you know what I mean? Well, that's different. What do you think about that? So, body's hoisted up on cement blocks and 4x4 posts. Very unsafely, might I add. The concrete blocks are stacked in ways they're not designed for, but it'll hold. So anyway, when I block them up like that, I jack up the rear. I use a whole bunch of stuff on top of the jack for, you know, to get as much slack out of it as I can to the bottom of the trunk floor at the back. I raise the back up, slide a 4x4 post across there, set it back down on the 4x4 post in between the frame and the body, and then I move everything around to the front, and I put a block of wood right here lengthways, just a short one like a 4x4 right here. I jack that up, slide a 4x4 post between the frame and the body. Then I let everything down, and then I put the jack, reposition the jack underneath the 4x4. And I usually use, I got like a half a concrete block that's broken, you know, got to be safe, you know what I mean, on top of the jack. And sometimes I put another little piece of 4x4 post in between that, but basically take a lot of space out of the floor jack. That way you can get it pretty high. And I usually lay one sideways, one up and down, and then whatever I can get in here, which is, in that case, is a 2x4 piece. And then pretty much the same in the back. Go back, reposition the jack back here on this 4x4 and lift it up by the 4x4 post, and then stack it just like that. And then I take the front wheels off of the frame. I have this piece of steel that I put out here across the frame rails, and I pull the wheels off and I let it down on a furniture dolly or a wheel dolly, whatever you got. Lay that cradle right in the middle of that. When you pull the wheels off, that really just slams that chassis way down low to the ground, and this will clear your 4x4 post to roll it out backwards. You always want to go out backwards because you don't have to have it as high because of the kick-ups in the frame back here. So anyway, you just roll the chassis out backwards. So now I just put that wheel on. I'm getting ready to put this wheel on. And then I'm going to move this chassis over here. Then I'm going to take that chassis and get it positioned around behind here, and then pull the front wheels off, lay it down on the furniture dolly, roll it under, and then in reverse order with the floor jack, start letting it down. So I don't ever really want to show how I do that because, you know, people will do that and then somebody could really get hurt. But anyway, it's just how I do it. I've done it this way for years, and I mean, if you went way back at the beginning of my channel, just when I started my YouTube channel, that's not counting all the cars that I built here before, there's been a lot of body swaps go on right here in this very spot. So I'm going to go ahead and try to finish this out before it gets dark. I at least want to set this down on there. So this rocker was crushed in right here, I think from a forklift, so that is not from that 4x4 post crunching it. That is just, that spot in that rocker was already there. All right, so that's as far as I'm going to go for tonight. So I've got the new chassis setting under the car, and I put some really long bolts in here just to kind of let them set there, and that way when I'm letting the jack down all I got to do is basically watch for this to start going in the body mount. I know I'm in the right area. It's basically an alignment pin. I went ahead and put Steve's old wheels and tires on the frame, and the main reason is if I'm putting body mounts and bolts in it and stuff, I don't want 4 different size tires and wheels, because it'll have the frame and everything all twisted up. So these are all, you know, the size in the rear is bigger than the front, but they're all the same. Like, it should be level back there and it should be level up here, so that's why I put those on. He said I could borrow these as long as I wanted. The good thing about these is they hold air and they match, but I'm not big on muscle car wheels on a 55, but it's just, you know, temporary. This thing's going to get 5-slot mags. I've already got them. I've got 15x5s for the front and 15x8s for the rear. But tomorrow, between the rainstorms, I don't know what time it's supposed to rain. I don't know if it's raining all day or what. I'm going to go ahead and cut out this rear piece back here and get the spot welds drilled out. And I'm going to go ahead and install my new pieces. And after those are put in, which all I can really do is spot weld the ends, or plug weld the ends. But it'll be enough to go ahead and let it down, because that brace will hold the back of that up. But anyway, I can go ahead and put the body mount bolts back there and everything. So I guess that's it for tonight. That's going to be pretty awesome, man. I have a super nice chassis underneath this car. So now it'll have, it's a 370 gear, hydraulic 5-speed standard transmission, 3/4 inch forward engine mounts and side engine mounts. It's going to get disc brakes up here, but for now it's just the drum stuff. I'm going to leave it drum in the rear. That'll end up being a pretty sweet little rig, man. So here's the chassis out from under it. Check out these shackle extensions, man. Ain't that crazy? That is insane. Golly. You can see their torch mark where they notched it. You can see the little butchery mark from the torch where they had to notch it out for that. That's pretty cool. So this actually has wagon leaf springs under it. See how many leaves are in there? So these are from a station wagon. So this is kind of what guys would do to jack them up in the rear real high. Shackle extensions and wagon leaves and stuff. So anyway, this frame is not as bad as I thought it'd be. I figured this was going to be, this back here was going to be all twisted and bent up from a, you know, a quarter panel needing put on the car, but from the looks of it, it's not bad at all. There's not really much of anything except for where somebody put a hook in here and it ripped the metal. I mean, that's repairable. I'd just cut it out and put a new piece in there, but anyway, the rear frame rails are straight and nice. I don't see anything wrong with this up here. The only thing bad on this is the frame rails up here, the horns. They're a little bit beat up a little bit, but this one to me looks like it's kicked out that way a little bit. This one looks like it's good, but that one there is kicked out. But anyway, it's pretty dinked up here, which all this can be straightened up, hammered and dollied out. But there's a chunk of metal missing right here. I don't know how the hell that happens. That's strange. But this frame, you know, is not as, I just assumed that was really going to be kinked up back there, but oh well. I mean, this frame's meant, it, you know, just had a little hiccup over here on this one side where somebody put a hook in there, but this frame is super nice, so I'm good with it. I mean, the frame had to come out from under it anyway, so I could replace body mounts and stuff. But that is how it's going to have to set tonight. Hopefully we don't have too bad of a windstorm. Yeah, she's a little shaky. It ain't going to go too far if it does fall. It's pretty much just going to land on its own frame, but it'll be good for tonight. So I will pick this up tomorrow. Hopefully it does not rain tomorrow when I'm trying to do stuff. But knowing my luck, it will. So I have a car hoisted up on blocks and 4x4 posts underneath the carport. And when my wife comes home this afternoon, she's not going to be able to get into the carport in her parking spot. If you can hear that out there. It's going to be a good day.